course there'll be a peaceful transfer, and there was last time.
So I couldn't be prouder to be on this ticket and couldn't be prouder to stand with UAW.
We have to be willing to call people out. Lying about your military service in order to procure political points, that's really disgraceful conduct.
Hello, I'm Adriana Diaz in Washington, and welcome to America Decides. Former President Donald Trump makes his first public appearance since rival Kamala Harris picked her running mate. From the Democratic ticket to President Biden stepping aside to the state of the economy, he had a lot to say. It is day 3 of the new Harris-Walz battleground state tour, with a campaign stop in Detroit this afternoon and a rally tomorrow in Phoenix. Our campaign reporter, Aaron Navarro, is here with us in studio. Aaron, it was a busy day. So Harris was supposed to go to North Carolina. That got pushed aside because of the weather. They had an extra day in Detroit. How did they use that time?
Kind of striking. You said it's only day 3 of this ticket. It feels a bit longer. Organized labor is crucial. It was crucial to President Biden's coalition of support, and Harris is continuing on that. The UAW was one of the first labor groups to endorse Harris since she officially became the candidate. And you really saw Walz and Harris kind of make the argument that they are connected to the union workers, the middle class, while someone like former President Donald Trump is not. It was kind of striking to me during Walz's remarks. He said, quote, and this is talking about Trump, quote, "He doesn't know you, he doesn't care about your family." So they're really leaning into that contrast, while at the same time, and this is still an early candidacy, not really going into many specifics on their own policies, own ideas. We'll see if that changes in the next couple weeks.
Still waiting for that official platform ahead of the DNC. So we were all watching President Trump today give his press conference from here in the Bureau. I was here on the 2nd floor. You were upstairs on the 3rd floor. And one of the things that really jumped out at us was he mentioned 3 debates. One on September 4th, September 10th, and then there was one more. What have we heard from the Harris campaign? Because she's really only publicly agreed to one debate on September 10th.
And this comes after a couple weeks where Trump was saying he might not do a debate because now it's Kamala Harris and not Joe Biden at the top of the ticket. We know that ABC has confirmed that September 10th, that date is confirmed. Both camps agree to that. And NBC is saying that they are in communication with the Harris and Trump campaigns for that September 25th debate, potentially. Have not heard yet back on the earlier September Fox News debate. The Harris campaign has long been on offense in terms of debate talk with Trump, saying that he's the one to back out. We'll see how they respond to his new challenge for additional debates.
Like she said, if you have something to say, say it to my face. Right. And he said anytime, anywhere. So they're just throwing all this rhetoric around.
Debate over debates.
Debate over debates. Yeah. Exactly right. So yesterday in Detroit, Vice President Harris, her speech was interrupted by protesters decrying the war in Gaza. Let's play a clip of what she had to say.
I'm here because we believe in democracy. Everyone's voice matters, but I am speaking now. I am speaking now.
She really handled that moment differently than President Biden, who was regularly interrupted with similar decries against the war in Gaza.
And she gave a very stark acknowledgement of the political realities of this in a state like Michigan, where it can be so tight. Later on, she said in response to some of the protesters, if you want Trump to win, just say that, but I am speaking. It's interesting, too, because before she spoke, she met with 2 leaders of the Uncommitted movement. These are the pro-Gaza protesters that organized kind of protest votes during the primary towards President Biden. And they seemed receptive. They said that she was open to another meeting with them, and showed a lot of empathy for their stories and what they're hearing from their communities about Gaza. So it's interesting to see how she will navigate this issue in the next 80, 90 days.
And this is a powerful group in Michigan, right? Like, these are people, especially from largely Arab communities, thinking about Dearborn, Michigan, where there's a large Palestinian community who, when they voted in the primary, as you said, they voted uncommitted as a protest to President Biden's position on the war on Gaza in support of Israel. She really has a fine line to walk because she supports our biggest ally, Israel. Personally, her husband's Jewish, but at the same time, a lot of the Democratic base has taken issue with this war.
In Michigan, the uncommitted vote was 100,000, well over the margin between Trump and Biden in 2020, Clinton and Trump in 2016. So it'll be crucial for Democrats to keep that coalition, as well as just, appease the progressives that seem to be excited about Governor Walz being added to the ticket. We'll see how long that lasts as her policies on Israel and Gaza seem more defined.
And younger voters,
right,
who they definitely have momentum with. Erin Navarro, thank you so much. Our Caitlin Huey-Burns is with us now. She was at former President Trump's press conference today. Caitlin, thanks for joining us. Let's listen to some of what Trump had to say today.
We have somebody that hasn't received one vote for president, and she's running, and that's fine with me. But we were given Joe Biden, and now we're given somebody else. Kamala's record is horrible. She's a radical left person at a level that nobody's seen. She picked a radical left man that is, he's got things done that he has positions that are just not, it's not even possible to believe. We have a very, very sick country right now. You saw the other day with the stock market crashing, that was just the beginning. That was just the beginning. It's going to get worse. It's going to get a lot worse, in my opinion.
Caitlin, we haven't seen former President Trump take questions like this in a long time. Why now?
Yeah, Adriana, good to see you. Who took questions for over an hour at his Mar-a-Lago resort. And this was designed to show a contrast with the Harris campaign. Trump saying that Harris hasn't taken questions from the press since she was essentially announced as the nominee, and especially since she announced Tim Walz as her running mate. So this was designed to not only steal some headlines for Kamala Harris, who has been enjoying, in Trump's word, a honeymoon period, but also to try to draw this contrast by taking questions. That's significant because Trump has not been on the campaign trail this week. J.D. Vance has. He's been following Kamala Harris to nearly every stop on this battleground state tour, but Donald Trump has actually just been here in Florida. We haven't seen him in public since a rally that he had in Atlanta on Saturday. He's expected to go to Montana tomorrow. Montana is not a battleground state, but there is a significant big Senate race there that he said that he is hoping to turn out voters for. So significant because he hasn't been on the campaign trail, but wanted to take this time to kind of set up that contrast with Harris.
And Caitlin, you asked the former president about polling. Let's play that clip.
Well, it changes around a little bit. I'm getting other voters. Perhaps, I was doing very well with black voters, and I still am. I seem to be doing very well with black males. This is according to polls, as you know. It's possible that I won't do as well with black women, but I do seem to be doing very well with other segments, extremely well with Hispanic. Jewish voters way up, white males way up. White males have gone through the roof.
Caitlin, how has the Trump team, interpreted these numbers?
Well, remember, this Trump campaign had been built to run against Joe Biden. So they have had to change their strategy to compete against Kamala Harris. I actually asked Trump if he had to kind of recalibrate how he was recalibrating his strategy to run against Harris. And he said that he's not changing anything, that it's the same policies and the same administration. A group of reporters and myself met with Trump campaign officials today for a briefing on how they see the race. And they've noted that polls do show the race tightening because polls show that the Democratic base has coalesced around Harris and become more energized. Trump mentioned black voters in particular. For the past several months, he's been trying to make a play for black voters. The Trump campaign has seen in their polling that black women voters have come around in support of Harris and seen some uptick in numbers there. But younger black men are kind of the target for this campaign, but still a very tight race, especially in these battlegrounds.
And we'll have our top CBS News pollster joining us later in the show to break it all down. Caitlin Huey-Burns in front of a beautiful scene in Florida. Thank you so much for joining us. As we discussed, former President Trump says he is ready to debate. Our strategist panel is standing by to weigh in. You're streaming America Decides. The Harris-Walz campaign has a new ad hitting the airwaves targeting Latino voters in battleground states.
As a prosecutor, she protected us from violent criminals.
As Attorney General,
she beat the banks that kick families out of their homes.
As our vice president,
she fights for women's reproductive rights every day.
Let's bring in our political panel, Joel Payne and Lance Trover. Joel is a CBS News political contributor and Democratic strategist. Lance served as the campaign spokesperson for Doug Burgum's presidential campaign. Thank you both for being here with us. So let's dive right into it. Joel, we heard former President Trump say during that press conference, three debates, not one like we've heard before, but three. Should Harris agree to all three?
Well, I think Harris has agreed to what was agreed to before, which is the September 10 debate. I'll be curious to see what the campaign thinks. I don't think Kamala Harris is concerned about being on stage with Donald Trump, and that's probably what's got Donald Trump spooked. I think what also matters is what are the conditions? Is it on a certain network? Is there a studio audience? I think all those things matter because we know that Donald Trump and his team are going to use that to his advantage. So I trust that the Harris campaign is considering all those things. But I think one thing we know for sure, it looks like September 10, we're going to have a a showdown, and we'll see who wants to show off.
We do have one common denominator debate, and that is September 10th.
Yeah.
Lance, why do you think former President Trump made that change? Before he was just talking about wanting to debate on Fox in front of a live audience. Why did he call out those three debates now?
I think it was a smart play that they did today. I mean, if you go back, I mean, their argument would be, well, the original debate was set with Joe Biden. Well, that is now no longer happening. So I long thought that it was probably a strategic move on their part. I think they made a good play today to come out and propose the three debates and kind of put it back onto the Harris team and make them say yes or no to the debate. I think he kind of shifted the narrative, and that's what they took out of it today.
But why would he shift? Because he was kind of saying before, oh, well, I agreed to debate Biden, not Harris. And so it almost seemed like he was pulling back from the debates. And then today he went all in.
Well, the campaign has always telegraphed that he was going to debate. Yes, he did pull back. But again, I think it was a strategic move on their part to say, hey, let's take a step back. We have a different candidate. So let's take a look at the lay of the land. And they came out and agreed to the debates today. They also did something else today, which I think was good. They accomplished two goals. They made a lot of news on the debates, but they also drove home this issue of her not taking questions from the press, not holding press conferences, not doing one-on-one interviews with the media. And I also think they succeeded on that front today as well.
I think it's pretty clear Donald Trump is rattled, which, by the way, any candidate would be, right? You think you're running one race, and then a month ago, your world changes. And it's pretty clear they haven't figured out what their new campaign strategy is, what their line of attack on Harris or Walz is. I still did not hear really a discernible message today, and I don't know if the American people did, but it's pretty clear they're rattled. They have time to get it together. I think one thing this cycle has taught us is that we have very quick news cycles here. Remember a month ago when Donald Trump was almost at the wrong end of an assassin's bullet? Nobody's talked about that in a few weeks. So we know that things move very fast. And I think any Democrat, by the way, who feels overconfident at this moment would be wrong to do that. A lot of battles to be fought in this election.
You and I agree on that for sure.
So the fact that she hasn't taken questions from reporters yet, is that typical at this point, especially considering how truncated this campaign is? And so that's my question to you. And then to you, Lance, why go after Harris on that? You know, J.D. Vance went over to her reporters yesterday. You know, it looked like a stunt, but maybe it was strategy.
Well, I guess I'll start just by saying I don't think the vice president's going to have any problem sitting down. My sense is that it's been a whirlwind. I mean, gosh, she's had to spend time picking her running mate, learning about the potential running mates, doing all that, raising money, standing up a new campaign.
Taking questions from reporters is fundamental.
I will tell you, someone who has prepped candidates and prepped principals for a long time, it takes time to get prepared for those types of interviews. Remember, we're only 3 weeks into this. I imagine both leading up to and after the convention, you're going to see a lot of Kamala Harris sitting down with plenty of journalists. Don't worry, the American people will hear plenty from Kamala Harris, and something I hear as well is she does a lot of more informal meetings with reporters on the campaign trail as well.
Yeah, but we're 89 days out of an election, and she has not taken one question. What we have had are some named and many unnamed spokespeople who have gone out on her behalf, and that's fine, but walking back many of the liberal positions that she has taken over the course of the last 6 or 7 years. That is why it is critical, because right now voters do not know enough about her. What we do know is her far left record as a senator from California and what she's done as her time as vice president under Joe Biden. So that's why it is critical, because we're in the 3-month mark of an election here, folks.
One thing we know for sure, she will not be able to get elected without sitting down with a reporter. And so look, it's a topic right now. I don't think it'll be a topic in a few weeks.
Well, we invite her to CBS News, Vice President Harris, if you're listening. Joel, we're just a few days into Tim Walz being named as the vice presidential nominee. It feels like 3 weeks, but that only happened 2 days ago.
Yeah.
How do you think he's doing?
Oh, I think he's doing great. He did great at that introduction event. And I think he just adds a different dynamic and a different appeal. He's the type of surrogate that can go to places that maybe Vice President Harris is not as strong in. You could park him in the upper Midwest in those blue wall states, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and he can have the type of common appeal to those folks that maybe, again, the Vice President Harris doesn't naturally have come to her. She could spend more time in the Sun Belt in places like Arizona, Nevada, and in Georgia. So it really adds a dimension to that campaign that I think they sorely needed.
All right. Well, Jill Payne and Lance Trover, thank you so much. On Super Tuesday, nearly 46,000 Democrats in Minnesota voted uncommitted instead of for President Biden over the war in Gaza. 11 of the state's 75 delegates remain uncommitted heading into the Democratic National Convention. That's not going to move the needle, but it is still symbolically significant. CBS News Minnesota reporter Uba Ali joins us now. She spoke to some of the uncommitted delegates. Thank you so much for joining us. So how are these delegates responding to the new Harris-Walz ticket?
I mean, listen, it's no secret that the excitement is building here on the ground in Minnesota. But when it comes to those 11 delegates, they say it's going to take a lot more than just putting Walz on that ticket to get them to move the needle, to get them to change their messaging. I mean, I spoke to Asma Mohammed, the lead organizer of the grassroots campaign here on the ground, and she says it's going to take a lot more than just that Walz ticket to get them to change their vote.
And what are these
I think it's important that Minnesota is on the national stage right now. And I think because we have 11 delegates, which is over a third of the uncommitted delegates that are going to the DNC, we really need to uplift those delegates. And it's up to our governor, Tim Walz, to make sure that our voices are heard.
And that messaging they want to get across not only to Walz, because they say they feel like he's a little bit more lenient than the Biden administration, but that message still is something they haven't got commitment on.
And Uba, what is it exactly that they're hoping to hear at the DNC that could really move the needle for them?
I think we saw it in Michigan yesterday. The messaging is they want to see a ceasefire in Gaza. They don't want just lip service. They say they want that commitment. And I mean, we've got 11 delegates who are all on the same page going into the DNC. And I want you to take a listen to what that means for them and what they hope to accomplish when they get there.
The reality of Uncommitted is we don't believe our commitment ends until we get a commitment to an arms embargo, meaningful a permanent ceasefire, which means an arms embargo.
I think something we're going to have to really take a look at is all 11 have the same game plan going to Chicago in a couple of weeks to meet with Harris and get some sort of commitment. But that needle moves once November comes on if they're going to be checking that box for Harris and Walz.
Ubali, thank you so much for reporting. Next, as two veterans vie to be vice president, J.D. Vance takes aim at Democratic rival Tim Walz's military record. You're streaming America Decides.
When Tim Walz was asked by his country to go to Iraq, you know what he did? He dropped out of the Army and allowed his unit to go without him. What bothers me about Tim Walz is the stolen valor garbage. Do not pretend to be something that you're not.
J.D. Vance is slamming the military record of his rival for the vice presidency, Tim Walz. The Ohio senator is alleging the Minnesota governor deliberately, quote, abandoned his unit by retiring before it was deployed to Iraq nearly 20 years ago. The Harris-Walz campaign has responded, saying in part, quote, after 24 years of military service, Walz retired in 2005 and ran for Congress. The campaign added Governor Walz would never insult or undermine any American service to this country. Joining us now is James Laporta, who is a verification producer for the CBS News Confirmed team, our fact-checking unit. James, thanks so much for joining us. So talk to us about what it is we know for certain about Tim Walz's military record.
Sure, and thanks for having me. So what we know for certain is Governor Tim Walz, he joined the military, joined the National Guard at 17, served in both the Nebraska and Minnesota National Guard, National Army Guard units. He served for over 24 years, earned several Army Commendation Medals and Achievement Medals. He trained as an infantryman when he was in Nebraska. When he moved over to Minnesota, he was field artillery, and he was with the 1st Battalion, 125th Field Artillery Unit in Minnesota. He deployed overseas in support of Operation Enduring Freedom and was stationed in Italy. And so, yeah, I mean, those are all things about his record, but in terms of his military record.
So what is it that remains unknown about Walz's time in the military that, if not lending credibility to Vance's claims, doesn't completely invalidate them either?
So for me personally, the question that I've had out to him and both the Minnesota National Guard that perhaps, you know, just for my purposes, I would like for documentation and also for timeline purposes, is at what point did Governor Walz decide to retire? You know, exactly when did he actually submit the paperwork to retire? Typically, just speaking generally about the military, it's several months that it requires to retire. He retired in May of 2005. So arguably, it's conceivable that he submitted paperwork several months before that. But for my timeline purposes, I would like to know when, especially because there's these questions of whether or not he abandoned his unit or not. That's not for me to say. There are people out there that, he was over the 20-year mark when he retired. So it was perfectly within his right to retire whenever he wanted. And there are soldiers who back him up on that, who say he could retire whenever he wanted. But just for my purposes, in terms of the job that I do here, I would like to know exactly when he submitted his retirement papers.
And I thought it was interesting that the quote from the campaign says that he retired in 2005 and ran for Congress, not to run for Congress. So it's unclear exactly the reason why. But like you said, after more than 20 years of service, anyone has the right to retire. What was the motivation? That is the question. James Laporta, thank you so much for joining us. Polls show Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump still in a very close race nationwide. Next, our pollster, Anthony Salvanto, will break down the numbers. You're streaming America Decides. Hi, Anthony.
The polls are looking like they're very strongly for us. And no matter where you look, in fact, a lot of states that people thought weren't in play are very strongly in play. Some were actually leading in.
That was Donald Trump in June when it felt like every poll was trending in his direction. 2 months later, and Kamala Harris's ascent to the top of the Democratic ticket has this race looking like it is in a dead heat. The nonpartisan Cook Political Report is moving Arizona, Georgia, and Nevada from lean Republican to toss-up. CBS News Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvanto, joins us now. Anthony, thanks so much for being with us.
Great to talk to you, Adriana.
So, Anthony, break it down. What is the current state of the race at this moment?
It's close, in one word. This is what illustrates it. Here's the map. We're going to spend a lot of time with this map over the next couple of months. The states that are in white are the battleground states, and they are all close. They are very close in all of our CBS News estimates. They're close in a lot of other polling as well. They will decide the race, and so that makes the race overall close. For context, Joe Biden, when he was at the top of the ticket, was in fact trailing Donald Trump, in some places substantially. But now there's been this big reset. Now the race is tight with Harris at the top of the ticket. And I just want to show you a little bit of the story of why. First of all, a lot of voters saying in general, over 2/3, saying that they think the country is ready to elect a black woman as president. But I want to show you this as well. Harris has consolidated the Democratic base. She's got 96% of Democrats with her. And that's on the back of an increase in enthusiasm among Democrats. More Democrats saying that they're likely to vote, that they're going to turn out. That's something that wasn't happening as much with Joe Biden, also even with independents. And I'll show you this, too, because we talk a lot about these demographic groups. Harris doing better among black voters than Joe Biden was, a core part of the constituency, so movement there, as well as increased enthusiasm and saying that they're going to turn out. That's the underpinning of the change in the dynamic, Adriana.
Those are really weak spots for Biden. Anthony, what is the larger picture? What's the context that people should keep in mind going forward?
I think it's going to be, number one, watch those battleground states, okay? Number two, watch these enthusiasm numbers if they can sustain, so that among Democrats and including also among Republicans, it's that enthusiasm that leads to express propensity to vote. And that's something that you want to watch because there are so few undecided, so few voters who would even consider the opposing candidate at this point, that turnout really matters. So this boost that we've seen in excitement, in enthusiasm, sustaining that is going to be critical for the Democrats, and it's certainly going to be important for the Republicans to sustain what they've had, Adriana.
Anthony Salvanto, thank you so much for breaking it all down. And now we have Shelby Talcott and Tom Lobianco here with us. Shelby is a political reporter for Semaphore. Tom is the co-founder and national politics reporter for 24 Site News. Thank you both so much. So as we were sitting here getting mic'd up, we heard that Kamala Harris took some questions from reporters and that she actually made reference to the debates at her event in Detroit. Shelby, what do you know?
Yeah, so she confirmed that she's looking forward to debating Donald Trump on September 10th, which is that ABC debate that was previously scheduled, and then Donald Trump sort of pushed back on it once Joe Biden dropped out of the race. So now that seems to be on once again. From my understanding, that is the only official debate out of the three that Donald Trump had earlier announced that has been confirmed. So it remains an open question whether both candidates end up agreeing to that Fox News and NBC debate as well.
Great. And I know we do have a tweet also. She tweeted about that September 10th debate. And I imagine, I haven't seen the tweet myself yet, but left out mention of the other two more than likely. Yeah, there it is. I hear that Donald Trump has finally committed to debating me on September 10th. I look forward to it. All right. Those are the words from Vice President Harris. Now, let's talk about that Cook political report shifting Nevada, Arizona, Georgia toward Harris. Tom, what do you attribute this to, and do you think it'll last?
Re-engagement with younger minority voters, Black and Latinos, especially with men. I mean, this was the demographic that Trump was going after through much of the race. And actually, I just had Gabe Fleischer on over the 24 Site podcast, and we were talking about this, just posted, about whether this is a trend that continues or whether it's a blip. And this gets back to the energy. Is it a honeymoon with Harris, and especially now with Walz, or is it momentum? I gotta be honest, this feels to me like momentum. I mean, the energy at these Kamala Harris rallies is the closest thing I saw would have been Bernie Sanders back in 2016. And it's really astounding. Does that carry past Labor Day? That's the next thing.
Well, also, there's the part of just the runway. This has been a truncated campaign. So while there is momentum, they have less distance to cover, right?
Yes, very. A lot easier. I mean, the sprint that's going on, and in a lot of ways, too, it makes it so much harder for Trump, Vance, and the Republicans to define them. I mean, this is why we saw the amped-up attacks with the quote-unquote stolen valor, the swift boating attacks on Walz, why everything is ramping up so fast. The press conference today from Trump trying to push her into a corner, saying, why aren't you out there doing interviews? The speed, it's hard to overstate just how important the messaging over the last 5 years against Biden was successful. And now that you don't have that, if you're the Republicans, how much of a problem that is.
Yeah, it does feel like we're in fast forward. So, Shelby, you have new reporting on J.D. Vance and those accusations he's made against Walz's military career. Tell us about that.
Yeah, you know, I spoke to him on his plane yesterday afternoon after a long day of him sort of trailing the vice president in that effort to
literally trailing.
Yes, literally trailing in an effort to push her to speak to the press more and do these press conferences. And he really... he was the first person, I think, on Trump's campaign to officially, loudly make this into a big deal. We had seen tweets from his advisors over the past few days, but he really went full-fledged into this. He argued that it was stolen valor. He argued that Tim Walz has inflated his military record. And he also spoke to me about other things about Tim Walz, about his political record, about whether he is pro-family or not, and his sort of history in his own home state. And he argued to me that there are things that he agrees with him on, like feeding kids in schools, but ultimately some of the other more progressive measures that Tim Walz has taken is dangerous, essentially, to America.
Anything he pointed out in particular about those family values?
Yeah, so one of the big things was the transgender bills that Tim Walz has signed into law. That has been a really big narrative from Donald Trump's campaign and from Republicans in sort of saying, hey, this is a very progressive vice presidential pick. He is even more lefty than Joe Biden was. So that's one of the things that J.D. Vance harped on in our conversation.
So Harris and Walz have been in Detroit. They met with the UAW. They've been endorsed by their leader. But we still haven't heard from the Teamsters. They typically wait a little longer until both conventions are done. How critical is that endorsement?
Very important it really is very important for the Democrats here, especially because, I mean, look, coming out of Milwaukee, we were all up there. This reshaping of the Republican Party into more of a populist party is built a lot, especially on the blue wall, the Rust Belt states, manufacturing, and trying to eat into that union base. I mean, this is part of the reason why you had Paul Manafort working in 2016 with the campaign, and again now with the campaign. We saw him on the floor in Milwaukee in RNC, working on labor, trying to bring them in. And when Teamsters President Sean O'Brien was up there, I think it was the second day of the convention, he got a really weird reception. It was not a Republican speech. So some of this is brinksmanship with the Democrats, like eventually he'll come home. But you can see an opening for the Republicans to really eat into that base, a traditionally Democratic base.
Thank you both so much. There's so much more we could talk about, but unfortunately, this is only an hour show. Thank you so much, Shelby and Tom, for being with us.
Thank you.
The Middle East is in danger of a widening war following the assassinations of Hamas and Hezbollah leaders. We are tracking the rising tension in the region next. You are streaming America Decides. Israel is bracing for an anticipated retaliatory attack after the assassination of two top Hezbollah and Hamas leaders. Just this evening, the Israeli Security Cabinet met to discuss its preparations, and the top U.S. commander in the Middle East has been in Tel Aviv recently. Let's bring in CBS News Chief Foreign Affairs Correspondent and Face the Nation moderator, Margaret Brennan. So, Margaret, the leader of Hezbollah has pledged a response. What could we expect to see?
Well, Adriana, U.S. officials tell me that Hezbollah may be ready to attack within the next 24 to 48 hours. The question is the scale of what they do. And this is significant because to date, Lebanese Hezbollah has been unwilling to engage in anything other than these tit-for-tat rocket exchanges. Those are deadly, no question. But they have held back from engaging in a larger scale war. And the last time I spoke with former CENTCOM Commander General McKenzie on Face the Nation, he said that is the most significant thing he has seen to date, the decision not to engage by Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah. And that's important because if you look at the weapon stash that Hezbollah has, the CIA estimates 150,000 missiles and rockets. They are the most significant militia Iran backs in the region. They are the largest non-state military actor here. And so if they do choose to retaliate and at a scale larger than what they've done, it could set off escalation risk in a way that really concerns U.S. officials.
And so why did the general say that they have been holding back? And how is the U.S. trying to assess the risk of a larger attack?
I feel like we've been talking about the risk of a wider war ever since October and that horrific attack Hamas carried out on October 7th that triggered this cycle. But at that time, the Biden administration did step in and tell Prime Minister Netanyahu, successfully at the time, don't open another front in the north. Do not go to war with Hezbollah, which is far more militarily significant and could do more damage in a traditional military sense, and also trying to hold Iran at bay. What's interesting is what we're talking about now is Hezbollah acting independent of Iran in an attack in the next few days. So we're watching this with the idea that if the United States diplomatically can keep them sort of in a box by sending messages to Hezbollah through Lebanese officials, that would be a diplomatic success if they can keep this somewhat contained. But there's the risk here that if they get in this tit for tat, Israel could engage in a war here that would draw the United States in, a war they couldn't finish without American support.
Diplomats working through the night for weeks now, months now. This all happens against the backdrop of ceasefire negotiations. Where do they stand? What's the latest that we're hearing from the different parties involved?
So the ceasefire that the United States is trying to help sort of midwife here is between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. But it has impact for the entire region. And that's the Biden strategy here, is can you get at least a 6-week ceasefire, the release of hostages that Hamas is holding, lower the temperature here in a way that allows for all the militias in the region to take a step back. But also can, in this unique moment we're in, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu turn to the hard right coalition of his party and say, look, I just killed the political leader of Hamas and 2 significant Hezbollah leaders. I'm ready to take a concession and bring some of these hostages home. He has shown, that this is the argument U.S. officials are making behind closed doors. It was significant to see today President Biden sign on to a statement alongside the Qatari and Egyptian leaders saying it's time, and in fact, August 15th is the date on the calendar. You guys got to get this done. Bring the hostages home, allow for a 6-week ceasefire, and maybe we can extend this into a larger end to all fighting.
Hamas and Hezbollah are 2 distinct groups. So how will this ceasefire with Hamas help keep Hezbollah at bay?
Well, what's interesting is it would provide an excuse to take a step back. Everyone's beating their chest at this moment, right? And what we hear from U.S. officials is that Hezbollah doesn't want a wider war. Israel doesn't want a wider war. But this escalation risk, you hit an area that has unintended consequences, you can't really solve for that. You can get into a pattern. And all you have to do is look at history here. Hezbollah was created in the 80s after Israel invaded Lebanon. That was a pretty significant unintended consequence. If they can get in Gaza a ceasefire, it allows a lot of these militias to say, we can pull back. It allows Iran to pull back.
It interrupts this momentum. Yes, Margaret Brennan.
It robs them of an excuse.
Correct. Thank you so much for joining us. Next, a foiled terror plot forces organizers to cancel Taylor Swift concerts in Vienna. What we are learning about the suspects' ties to the Islamic State. You're streaming America Decides. Those are Swifties in Vienna singing Taylor Swift's Cruel Summer, a song that likely resonates with them now more than ever. The music superstar was forced to cancel 3 of her Eras Tour shows in Austria's capital over an alleged ISIS-linked terrorist plot. Authorities arrested 2 young men who say they wanted to commit an attack outside of the stadium where the concerts were supposed to take place. CBS News Pentagon reporter and producer Ellie Watson is covering all of it from Vienna. Ellie, thank you so much for being with us. So what is the latest? Now we're a day into this investigation. What have authorities discovered about this alleged terrorist plot and the suspects?
Thank you for having me. We're learning new details from our DC Justice team, new reporting that uncovered some details of the plot. So yesterday, a 19-year-old and a 17-year-old were arrested, but we also learned that a 15-year-old was interviewed but not arrested. A search of the homes of the 2 arrested uncovered a siren that apparently was going to be used to pose as a police officer to get through security, as well as knives potentially going to be used to attack concertgoers lining up to go into the stadium, as well as chemicals to make a bomb, although the suspects did not have all of the equipment to actually complete making the bomb. Authorities this morning also said that one of the suspects had just recently signed on to work for one of the companies providing services to the stadium for the concert. Authorities said that the 2 arrests yesterday minimized the danger, but there was still enough apparent danger to warrant canceling all 3 shows.
I mean, those details are chilling. One of these people could have had access to the venue to work inside the concert hall and have access to the behind the scenes if indeed that was their plan. Now, Ellie, Austria's interior minister says the attacks were supposed to take place today and tomorrow. You are in Vienna because you went there to attend this concert. How do you feel, and what's the reaction been from fans there?
So a little bit surprising. I mean, yesterday we were down near the stadium at the merchandise tents buying our sweatshirts, buying our posters with all of the other Swiftie fans who traveled. We met some people from Macedonia. We met some people from England. So then we got back with all of our merchandise, saw the breaking news alert that 2 had been arrested. We're a little scared, but thought, okay, maybe that's the end of it. We're going to have a good time, be safe tomorrow. And then we got word that it was canceled. I learned from my little sister who called me, and then I had subsequent friends who called me who knew that we were all here to have a good time, to get one of our favorite artists. And that was very devastating last night. Today, walking around Vienna, you can see the videos of Swift fans, Swifties, exchanging bracelets, singing at the top of their lungs. One of the songs that I heard in the street was Long Live. One of the lyrics in that song is I'm Not Afraid, which they did sing at the top of their lungs. Not deterred, trying to have a good time, make the most out of it despite the canceled shows.
Are the fans that you're talking to, do they feel relieved that these suspects were arrested and that this plot was uncovered, or is there frustration about the concert being canceled?
I haven't seen any frustration. I think people are relieved that the 2 were arrested. I think there is still a bit of a unease of, that was supposed to be tonight or tomorrow night. And we have seen concerts in the past where attacks have been successful. The Ariana Grande one in Manchester killed over 20 people. So I think fans are appreciative that Austrian authorities hopped on this early, and Austrian authorities have said, a lot of people are going to be disappointed, as they are, but it's better to prevent a tragedy than to go through with it based on the information we learned.
Absolutely, just chilling details. Ellie Watson, thank you so much. And as we do from time to time on this show, we want to look back at historic moments in political history. 50 years ago today, President Richard Nixon declared it was time to step aside as pressure over the Watergate scandal mounted within his own party. Still, his resignation speech shocked the nation.
To leave office before my term is completed is abhorrent to every instinct in my body. But as president, I must put the interests of America first. Therefore, I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow. Vice President Ford will be sworn in as president at that hour in this office.
And then this iconic moment the next day of President Nixon departing from the South Lawn of the White House. The following month, he would receive a pardon from President Ford. Despite pleas from fans, Steve Martin says he will not play vice presidential nominee Tim Walz on Saturday Night Live. After Kamala Harris chose her running mate on Tuesday, SNL producer Lorne Michaels called Steve Martin to offer him the role. The actor told the Los Angeles Times that he told Michaels he's not an impressionist, joking, quote, "I was picked because I have gray hair and glasses." Maya Rudolph will reprise her role as Kamala Harris. And that does it for today. We will be back for another edition of America Decides Monday at 5 p.m. Eastern. The Daily Report with John Dickerson starts right now.